I still remember the morning I left for that business trip as if it were yesterday. The city skyline shimmered under the first rays of sunlight, and I felt this strange mix of excitement and nervous energy buzzing through me. It wasn't just any trip. It was the culmination of months of late nights, endless calls and sacrifices I hadn't even realized I was making. Finally, a chance to prove myself in front of the board, to show that all the sleepless nights and missed dinners weren't for nothing. I zipped up my suitcase with a sense of accomplishment, my mind already running through the presentations and meetings I had meticulously prepared. Before leaving, I hugged my fiancé tightly, feeling his warmth and reassurance. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're going to crush it, babe. Don't worry about a thing here." I smiled, letting myself believe in those words completely. But there was always that little glint in my sister's eyes, something I had noticed for years, a flash of admiration mixed with a subtle, almost imperceptible resentment. She watched me pack, offering the usual encouragements, yet there was something carefully measured in her tone, the way she laughed at my jokes a beat too late, or clapped a little too lightly when I told her about my promotion. I shrugged it off, telling myself I was overthinking it. Family dynamics had always been complicated. Jealousy was almost normal between siblings. Still, I couldn't shake the slight chill in the air whenever my sister was around, a sensation that made me feel like I was walking on glass, careful not to provoke her hidden frustrations. My fiancé, oblivious to these subtle currents, chattered happily about the dinner he'd cook while I was gone, painting an image of a cozy, unbothered life. I believed in it, wholeheartedly, thinking we were all moving forward, celebrating my milestones together. Little did I know, beneath the polite smiles and polite encouragements, threads of betrayal were quietly weaving themselves into my absence. I imagined my sister returning to her apartment, perhaps scrolling through social media with a forced smile, measuring herself against my life, my engagement, my career. I wanted to believe she was proud of me. I really did. But a nagging instinct whispered that something was off, a quiet alarm I tried to ignore. As I drove toward the airport, I kept replaying the last evening with my family. My sister had lingered a little too long, asking questions about my work, my fiancé, the trip, all the while pretending to be casual. She had smiled at me, but it wasn't the smile of someone sharing my excitement. It was a smile of someone calculating, someone measuring, perhaps even planning. I chalked it up to my imagination, yet the sensation clung stubbornly, a shadow at the edge of my thoughts. Boarding the plane, I felt a rush of anticipation, my life poised on the edge of something great. I had no idea that the very people I trusted most, the people I loved, were about to turn the world I knew upside down. I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes, imagining the accolades, the applause, the recognition that awaited me, completely unaware that betrayal had already begun, quietly, carefully, and irreversibly. Growing up, I had always known my sister loved attention. She had a way of slipping into a room and immediately drawing everyone's gaze. Her laugh just a little louder, her stories just a little more dramatic. On the surface, she seemed supportive of me, celebrating birthdays, congratulating me on achievements. But looking back now, I can see how carefully she measured everything I did against herself. When I earned my first promotion, she clapped, smiling brightly, but I remember catching the flicker in her eyes, the fraction of a second where pride was mingled with something else, envy, maybe even irritation. Even as children, our parents had favorites, though they claimed otherwise. I was the responsible one, the quiet achiever who followed rules, got good grades, and never caused problems. My sister, in contrast, was the family charmer, the one who could get away with almost anything because of her charisma. I had learned early on to accept my role, thinking love was unconditional, but there was always a subtle tension between us, like two currents running side by side, never quite mixing. Every compliment she gave me had an edge, every smile a hidden question. Why her and not me? Her subtle jealousy grew sharper over the years. I remember the night I introduced my fiancé to the family. I was nervous, but he had this warmth and charm that immediately put everyone at ease. My sister hugged me and whispered, "I'm so happy for you." But her eyes lingered on him a fraction too long. I had dismissed it at the time, calling myself paranoid. But now I see that she had been observing, evaluating, calculating her own possibilities. Our shared history was full of these small, almost invisible competitions. When I bought my first apartment, she suddenly needed a coincidental tour of my place, comparing her furniture, her decorations, even the color of her walls. When I landed a high-profile promotion, she texted effusive congratulations. But the way she phrased her messages made me feel subtly diminished, as if my victories highlighted her own lack. She was a master at appearing supportive while sowing seeds of doubt and insecurity, a shadow I didn't recognize until it was too late, even now. I could picture her sitting at the kitchen table that morning, smiling as I zipped my suitcase, her eyes calculating, her thoughts hidden behind a practiced mask of encouragement. Outwardly, she had done everything right, offering help with last-minute packing and reminders to call if I needed anything. But beneath that carefully curated exterior was a simmering envy, a silent narrative in which she saw herself climbing over my life to claim what she thought she deserved. I hadn't noticed it then, but the cracks were already forming, invisible threads that would unravel everything I believed about family and loyalty. I was halfway through my flight when my phone buzzed relentlessly in my bag. At first I ignored it, thinking it was just another group text from work, but the persistent vibration gnawed at my nerves. When I finally unlocked the screen, my blood ran cold. It was a call from my best friend, her name flashing urgently. My stomach sank as I answered, a premonition I couldn't place tightening around my chest. "Sit down," she said immediately, her voice trembling. "You're not going to believe this. But your sister and Ryan," she faltered, almost choking on the words. My mind raced, trying to fill in the blanks, a sense of dread creeping in. "They eloped. Today, they just went to the courthouse and..." My vision blurred, the cabin around me disappearing. I dropped my phone onto my lap, trying to process what she had just said. My fiancé, the man I trusted, the man I was going to spend my life with, had married my sister while I was miles away, completely unaware. I felt like someone had ripped the floor from under me. My hands shook, my pulse thrumming in my ears. Disbelief wrestled with horror. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to curse the universe, but my body felt frozen, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Around me, passengers chatted casually, oblivious to the chaos consuming me, and the normalcy of the world only amplified the sting of betrayal. Anger surged almost immediately after the initial shock. How could they do this? The thought of their smiles, the laughter they shared while I was working tirelessly, made bile rise in my throat. My sister, who had hugged me goodbye that morning, who had whispered words of encouragement, had been plotting this the entire time. My fiancé, the person I had trusted most intimately, had let it happen, had let her manipulate him into turning against me. I felt humiliated, exposed, like a private betrayal had been dragged into the glaring light of public knowledge. Tears came unbidden, hot and stinging, and I buried my face in my hands. The betrayal was layered, complex, twisting every memory of trust into shards of doubt. The airport's announcement for boarding cut through my haze, grounding me back into reality. But reality now felt alien, foreign, and unbearable. I was no longer just the ambitious woman leaving for a career milestone. I was someone abandoned, someone publicly outmaneuvered by the two people I had loved most. Even as I sat there, heart pounding, I thought about the messages that would flood in, the whispers among family, friends, coworkers. Their secret had been discovered, and soon the world would know. My humiliation was inevitable, and the knowledge that it could all have been prevented had I only known the truth about their deceit only made the pain sharper. I clenched my fists, gripping the edge of my seat as a mix of grief and fury coiled in my stomach. And I realized, in that moment, that my life had irrevocably changed. I locked myself in my hotel room the moment I arrived, shutting the door against the world and collapsing onto the bed. The tears came fast and uncontrolled, hot and sharp, burning behind my eyes. I had never felt so hollow, so utterly betrayed, as if the ground beneath me had vanished and I was suspended in midair, grasping for anything solid. My mind spun endlessly, circling the same questions. How could he do this? How could she? Why didn't I see it coming? Each answer I tried to form was swallowed by a heavier, more suffocating disbelief. I replayed every interaction from the last month, every laugh, every compliment, every moment that now seemed laced with subtle manipulation. The little red flags I had ignored, the fleeting discomforts I had brushed aside, they were glaring now. The way my sister lingered a moment too long near my fiancé, her casual remarks that seemed innocent at the time, the way she smiled at me, but not at me, with something calculating in her eyes. I had wanted to trust, to believe in the goodness of people close to me, but trust had become a trap, leaving me wounded and exposed. Outside my window, I imagined the gossip already spreading among friends and family, the whispered versions of the story, the versions where I was the naive one, the one left behind. My social circles, once safe and warm, now felt like arenas of judgment and pity. I felt invisible, replaced, as if the life I had carefully built, the relationships, the love, the respect, was being quietly erased in favor of my sister's opportunistic triumph. FOMO gnawed at me, a sharp pang of being left out, being underestimated, being erased while they moved forward at my expense. I gripped my pillow and buried my face in it, imagining them laughing together, parading a happiness that was stolen from me. The humiliation pressed in, suffocating, and I felt both small and enraged. How could someone so close, someone I had called family, betray me so completely? Every memory of shared secrets, every late-night conversation, every promise of loyalty seemed suddenly tainted, as if they had been mere performances in a play where I had been the unwitting audience. In the quiet of that room, I alternated between sobbing and plotting, the oscillation exhausting me. I questioned my self-worth, wondering why I had been so blind, so trusting. I asked myself if I had failed to notice the subtle hints, if my innocence had been my weakness. Yet amid the despair, a spark of something else flickered. Anger, clarity, a realization that my life could not be defined by their treachery. The shame and humiliation were mine to bear for the moment, but the narrative was not over. I would find a way to reclaim what had been stolen, to turn the weight of their betrayal into something they could not anticipate. I didn't confront them right away. The idea of storming into their lives, screaming accusations, would have been satisfying in the moment, but it would have been fleeting, a hollow, impotent victory that left me empty. Instead, I retreated, further into myself, letting the initial shock settle while my mind sharpened. Anger transformed into focus, grief into calculation. I realized that patience, careful observation, and strategy would serve me far better than impulsive confrontation. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about exposing the depth of their betrayal in a way that left no doubt, no excuses, no room for denial. I began quietly gathering evidence, taking note of their patterns, conversations, and the subtle manipulations I had overlooked before. Every boast my sister made on social media, every casual reference to money or influence from my fiancé, became a puzzle piece. I started compiling screenshots, messages, and online traces, little breadcrumbs that, when connected, would reveal the truth they worked so hard to hide. It was meticulous work, and I reveled quietly in the control it gave me, a power they had never imagined I could wield. In the evenings, I replayed scenarios in my mind, imagining how I would reveal their deception, what reaction it would provoke, and how it would shift the balance of power. Each step required patience, timing, and precision. I couldn't let my emotions blind me. They had already used my trust against me, and I wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. My intelligence, long underestimated by both of them, became my weapon. I felt a strange thrill in recognizing that I was no longer the victim. They had underestimated the one person capable of turning their scheme against them. Even as I collected evidence, I maintained the facade of normalcy with friends and colleagues, letting the world see only a composed, professional version of myself. Behind closed doors, I planned and plotted, the weight of betrayal fueling every decision. I reminded myself repeatedly, they had taken a moment, a trust, a future I had believed in, and they would not succeed in taking my dignity or my ultimate triumph. Slowly, methodically, the plan formed in my mind. A blueprint for justice that would expose greed, deceit, and betrayal, and restore the balance they had so recklessly disrupted. The first victories were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they gave me a thrill I hadn't felt since discovering the betrayal. I began by sharing small inconsistencies with friends and family. Casual remarks about plans that didn't exist, financial boasts that didn't add up, moments where my sister's charm had slipped into arrogance. At first, people hesitated, unwilling to believe the picture I was painting. But when I presented concrete details, little pieces of evidence I had collected, doubts started to creep in. Questions were asked, eyebrows raised. Murmurs replaced polite silence. I reveled quietly in watching the walls of deception crack, the first tremors of power shifting in my favor. My sister and fiancé had believed they could manipulate everyone around them effortlessly, painting themselves as innocent, even charming, while I seethed in silence. Now, that illusion was faltering. Friends who had once praised my sister's generosity began hesitating, recalling odd moments and strange explanations that suddenly made sense. Each acknowledgement, each pause of uncertainty from those who once admired them, became a small triumph, a tiny reclamation of the control I thought had been stolen from me. One evening, over coffee with a mutual friend, I let a carefully framed question slip. "Didn't Ryan tell you he had to rush out that weekend because of work commitments?" Funny. He was in the city visiting my sister at the same time. I watched my friend's eyes widen, the gears turning as they pieced the story together. The subtle power I felt in that moment was intoxicating. I was no longer just the betrayed one. I was an observer, a manipulator of truth, slowly turning the tables. These minor victories didn't just expose them. They reshaped the perception of my life. My sister's flawless facade of charm, her effortless ability to draw attention, began to fracture under the light of scrutiny. I had always felt invisible in some ways, overshadowed by her boldness. But now I was seen, not as the naive sister, but as someone intelligent, patient, and calculating. That realization energized me, cementing a growing confidence that the real triumph was only beginning. By the time I went to bed that night, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The first cracks had appeared in their armor, and I could almost feel the shift in momentum. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I sensed that I was not powerless, that the scales were beginning to tilt. The plan I had nurtured in secret was working, quietly, and the knowledge that I had the upper hand, no matter how small, was a comforting balm to my wounded heart. I spent the next few days immersed in research, combing through every piece of information I could find about their lives, conversations, and financial dealings. Each message, every social media post, and even casual remarks my sister had made over the years became part of a pattern that revealed her motives and methods. I mapped out their network of friends, business contacts, and family connections, noting where lies overlapped and where truths had been carefully hidden. It was exhausting work, but with every discovery, a sense of control replaced the helplessness I had felt when I first learned of their betrayal. I found inconsistencies in their stories that previously seemed trivial, sudden business trips that conveniently aligned with personal visits, lavish gifts claimed as spontaneous generosity, and offhand remarks about inheritances or investments that didn't add up. Each small discovery became ammunition, proof of their greed and deceit. I recorded them meticulously, creating timelines and cross-references, and I began to feel the first real satisfaction since the shock of the elopement. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about exposing a truth they had worked hard to conceal. Late nights blurred into early mornings as I connected dots and plotted possible outcomes. I imagined confronting them, but not yet. First, I needed undeniable evidence. My mind sharpened with every discovery, each lie I uncovered feeding a growing strategy that would leave no room for excuses. I visualized their reactions, the disbelief on their faces, the social consequences, and the whispers of judgment that would inevitably follow. My anger, once raw and uncontrolled, was now directed, focused, and methodical. I also began noticing patterns in how my sister manipulated others. Her charm was deliberate, calculated, and terrifying in its precision. She knew exactly which friends to approach, which family members to influence, and how to present herself as virtuous while she maneuvered behind the scenes. And my fiancé, blind to her true nature, played his role perfectly, acting oblivious but complicit. Understanding this dynamic allowed me to anticipate their moves, giving me an upper hand that felt thrilling, empowering, and almost exhilarating. By the end of the week, I had amassed a trove of evidence and insight that could dismantle their carefully constructed lives. I had become the unseen force, the quiet observer who understood every angle of their deceit. The helpless, heartbroken woman I had been just days before had transformed into someone patient, precise, and dangerous in her determination. I wasn't just planning revenge. I was orchestrating justice, and the deeper I dug, the more inevitable their downfall felt. The day I had been planning for weeks finally arrived, and I felt a strange mixture of nerves and exhilaration. Every detail had been calculated, every possibility anticipated. I invited my sister and Ryan to a celebratory lunch under the guise of reconciliation, careful to include a few mutual friends who were unaware of the full story, but would witness the unfolding truth. From the moment they walked into the restaurant, smiling and oblivious to the storm that awaited them, I could feel the energy shift. They thought they were in control, but for the first time, I held all the power. I started casually, letting my conversation flow naturally, interspersed with carefully timed questions. I spoke about recent events, dropping subtle hints of what I knew, innocuous sounding, but precise enough to unsettle them. My sister laughed nervously at my remarks about shared memories, but there was a slight hesitation, a momentary flicker of fear that didn't go unnoticed. Ryan's confident grin wavered. I could see him trying to calculate what I might know. Every word I uttered was deliberate, a thread tugging at the fabric of their constructed image, and with each passing minute, the tension around the table grew palpable. Then came the first crack. I mentioned an investment my fiancé had bragged about to friends months earlier, one that I had verified was entirely fictitious. The laughter around the table died, replaced by awkward silence. I watched their faces carefully, my sister's lips pressed tightly together, Ryan's eyes darting, searching for a safe response. My friends exchanged glances, picking up on the incongruities I had planted, and whispers began to ripple through the room. The social reversal had begun. The world they had manipulated with charm and deceit was starting to unravel right in front of them. By the time dessert arrived, the trap was fully sprung. I revealed with calm precision details of their lies, financial exaggerations, manipulations, and moments where their public persona had been a facade. My sister's voice faltered as she tried to protest, but the mounting evidence and the silent witnesses made rebuttal impossible. Ryan attempted to laugh it off, but his laughter was hollow, defensive, failing to mask his embarrassment. The room, once filled with polite chatter, was now charged with tension, all eyes subtly recognizing the reversal. They had been caught, exposed in a way that left no room for charm or excuses. I sat back, letting the moment breathe, savoring the quiet victory. For the first time since their betrayal, I felt the intoxicating satisfaction of control. They were no longer untouchable. Their deceit was visible, their arrogance cracked. I didn't gloat, there was no need, but the shift in energy was undeniable. Power had reversed, and it was now mine. That day, in front of everyone who mattered, the people who had once humiliated and betrayed me were humbled, their social standing shaken, their confidence undermined. It was a taste of justice I had longed for, and it was sweeter than I could have imagined. I didn't expect help to arrive so suddenly, but that afternoon, My phone buzzed with a message from Mark, a coworker I had trusted for years. He had always been observant, quiet, the type who noticed details others overlooked. "Call me when you're free," his text read, simple and urgent. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was ready to let anyone in, but something in my gut told me he could be the edge I needed. By the time I returned the call, my heart was racing. Not from fear this time, but from the possibility of having an ally in a war I hadn't yet fought openly. "Listen," he said immediately, his tone brisk, but not unkind. "I know what happened. I've been keeping an eye on things, and you don't have to do this alone. I can help." I swallowed, my throat tight, surprised at the intensity in his voice. "How? What can you do?" I asked, almost afraid of hope. He outlined a plan. Access to financial records, insight into legal loopholes, and connections that could expose the lies my sister and Ryan had so carefully hidden. Each word was like a lifeline, and I felt a flicker of relief. Finally, I wasn't completely isolated. We spent hours talking, laying out strategies, anticipating their moves, and discussing contingencies. "They're clever," Mark said, "but they've underestimated you. Every lie they've told leaves a trail. We just need to follow it carefully, and they'll unravel themselves." I nodded, feeling the weight of control shift ever so slightly back toward me. I asked questions, challenged assumptions, and together we plotted the steps needed to expose them without giving away my hand too early. Each suggestion, each calculated move, made me feel stronger, more capable, more dangerous in the sense I needed most. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I allowed myself a small smile. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was planning, strategizing, and learning to wield patience as a weapon. Mark's guidance provided structure, turning chaos into a roadmap, grief into actionable steps. By the end of the call, I felt a renewed sense of confidence. The betrayal had been devastating, but with an ally at my side, I could finally envision a path to justice, one that was deliberate, precise, and unstoppable. The day of vindication arrived quietly, without fanfare, yet it carried a weight that made every sleepless night and tear-streaked moment worth it. Friends and family gathered, some curious, others skeptical, but all soon became witnesses to the truth I had carefully orchestrated. I didn't need to shout or demand attention. The evidence, the subtle revelations, and the careful exposures I had prepared spoke louder than words. I watched as realizations spread across the faces of those who had once questioned me, those who had doubted my instincts or assumed I had been naive. Every glance, every nod, every quiet acknowledgement reinforced the sense that I had not only survived betrayal, but had risen above it with clarity, intelligence, and grace. My sister's face, once confident and smirking, now bore the unmistakable signs of defeat. Her charm had crumbled under the weight of the truth, and she could no longer mask the envy and deception that had driven her actions. Ryan, equally exposed, looked around helplessly, realizing that the social currency they had once wielded so effortlessly was gone. The room's energy shifted subtly, yet unmistakably. People's admiration, once divided, now leaned entirely toward me. Whispers of respect, surprised nods, and lingering looks of realization spread like wildfire. It was in these moments that karma fully revealed itself, a quiet yet undeniable reckoning that left my betrayers humbled and socially diminished. I allowed myself to feel it. The pride, the relief, the subtle thrill of justice finally balanced. It wasn't just about humiliation or revenge. It was about demonstrating that patience, intelligence, and integrity could triumph over deceit, manipulation, and greed. Family members who had remained silent during my initial heartbreak now approached me with genuine acknowledgement, their eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and newfound respect. Friends, too, who had witnessed the small reversals, the subtle exposés, now openly celebrated my composure and strategy. Their validation wasn't just gratifying. It was a testament to the careful planning, the emotional restraint, and the calculated precision that had brought this outcome. I felt an unexpected lightness in my chest as I realized I had achieved something deeper than mere revenge. I had reclaimed my dignity, reasserted my value, and restored the moral order that had been disrupted by betrayal. My sister and Ryan's social standing, once artificially inflated by charm and deception, had been dismantled. Meanwhile, I stood in the quiet center of it all, strong, composed, and undeniably vindicated. Every whispered acknowledgement, every subtle nod of approval reinforced the truth. I had not just endured, I had mastered the situation. By the end of the gathering, there was no need for overt confrontation or dramatic declarations. The social verdict had been delivered through observation, evidence, and undeniable logic. Those who had doubted me were now forced to recognize my intelligence, resilience, and moral high ground. The sense of empowerment that came with that recognition was profound, a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and a quiet joy that could not be replicated by impulsive triumph. I had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. Yet I had orchestrated a victory that was complete, deliberate, and irrevocable. For the first time since that devastating morning when I learned of their betrayal, I allowed myself to exhale fully. I had endured heartbreak, humiliation, and deceit, and yet I emerged not only unbroken but elevated. Karma had not been rushed. It had been calculated, patient, and absolute. And in the midst of it all, I realized that the true reward was not simply their embarrassment, but the restoration of my own self-worth, the acknowledgement of my strength, and the undeniable affirmation that integrity and intelligence prevail, even against the most cunning of betrayals. The house was quiet that evening, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to simply sit and breathe. The chaos of exposure, the whirlwind of conversations and revelations, had finally settled into a calm I hadn't thought possible. I reflected on everything, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the painstaking planning, and the ultimate vindication. Each moment had left its mark, shaping me into someone stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the subtle currents of human behavior. I realized that the greatest victory wasn't the embarrassment of my sister or the exposure of Ryan's deceit. It was the restoration of my own power and peace. I thought about the lessons I had learned, painful though they were. Trust, I understood now, was precious but not blind. Love and loyalty required discernment. The pain of being replaced, of being humiliated by those I held closest, had been raw and inescapable, but it had also forged resilience. I no longer questioned my worth or the value of my instincts. My confidence had been tested in the harshest of ways, and I had emerged not only intact but elevated, aware of my capacity to endure, strategize, and triumph with integrity. There was a bitter sweetness in this reflection. Part of me mourned the innocence lost, the sister I had once thought I knew, the trust in relationships that had been shattered. But alongside that, mourning was clarity. Clarity that allowed me to move forward without bitterness, carrying lessons rather than grudges. I understood that closure wasn't about revenge or public acknowledgement. It was about reclaiming myself, setting boundaries, and embracing the dignity I had fought so hard to preserve. I pictured my life ahead with a quiet optimism. I had power now. Not the flashy, ostentatious kind, but the subtle, unshakable knowledge that I could protect myself, navigate deceit, and emerge unbroken from any storm. My relationships would be chosen carefully, my trust earned rather than assumed. The world no longer felt like a place where betrayal could take me by surprise. I had learned to anticipate, to observe, and to act when necessary. There was a satisfaction in this, a quiet pride that didn't need validation from anyone else. As night fell, I let a soft smile cross my face. I was no longer defined by what they had taken from me or the humiliation they had inflicted. I had reclaimed my narrative, and in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. The pain had shaped me, the strategy had empowered me, and the vindication had confirmed that integrity and intelligence endure. There was peace in knowing that I could face the future with confidence, grace, and the unwavering certainty that betrayal could not diminish my worth. In the stillness, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. I had been tested, I had suffered, and I had risen. The journey had been harrowing, but it had led to growth, wisdom, and a quiet, enduring strength. And as I closed my eyes that night, I knew, without a doubt, that I was whole again, that I had emerged victorious in ways far beyond what anyone else could see, carrying with me dignity, power, and inner peace.